Greetings. The divine within myself recognizes the divine within you. Let us shine. Today I'd like to discuss the Epstein release of files in a PG way. Because I'm a clairvoyant and an intuitive healer, but I don't pretend to have any special power. In that we're all special, of course I'm special, but what I'm trying to say is there are limitations to my abilities, and one of the limitations is I have to have a clear conscience, and I have to speak my my truth in order to have access to the universal wisdom. And I have to say that even though, my biggest video got 200 views, but there's always a potential for people to see this. I mean, it could be seen by lots of people, so I have to speak my mind in a way that is public to settle my nerves in order to have greater ability to channel. And I do think my disposition makes me uniquely capable of speaking in an effective way, not only to heal and process that our fellow humans are involved in some of these things, but also to provide a future where humanity is free from these ideas. And I guess that would be up to each individual, because each individual is solely responsible for their future, their eternal future. So whenever we give in to this idea that somebody has power over me, and me is not my physical body, because obviously someone could overpower my physical body, but my eternal soul is unalterable and unchangeable and unhurtable, right? It's eternal. So I have to connect with that soul, and I have to realize that every individual has a soul that is the same, not the same, but is likewise invincible. And that gets us right to the heart of why there's blackmail and why there's secrecy, because one individual is claiming that they have sovereignty over another individual. And that's fundamentally wrong. So it's going to fundamentally corrupt, and absolute corruption corrupts absolutely. So it's like how did these people get so depraved is what the public wants to know. But I'm telling you, there's a clear reason. And to be honest, maybe unknowingly, we're complicit. You and I are complicit because we have been indoctrinated into this power over paradigm where we can't imagine a world without a leader, right? We can't imagine a world without borders, because that's exactly how these individuals have perpetuated the big lie of power over another, is by having a system based on one person controlling other people through force, or more apt, not force, but through indoctrination, coercion, blackmail, and essentially getting someone to consent. That's the key. Because you can't actually rule the world through force, because well, there's a lot of factors why you can't, but basically because the creator gave us sovereignty so that we might choose our own path. And that's the ultimate reason we're here, is to be given free will and to gain the wisdom that comes from that. So the second you try to take someone else's free will away, then you become a violator of the cosmic law, and you become sidetracked from your destination of harmony, divinity, utopia, etc. And I think the problem is with the release of the information is there is a tendency to villainize and focus on the horrific aspects without going within, because really there's only one way to help this universe, and that's to go inside yourself, and to find yourself, and to resonate your truth, right? If your truth is discovered, in my opinion, it's going to be not a harmful, not a closed-minded type of truth. Truth is something that's expansive, that is accepting of not necessarily limitations, but of Crystal Smith as an individual, right, has a soul, but that soul is part of a collective soul, right? So to kind of come to terms with the fact that yes, you have free will, but no, you're not allowed to inhibit other people's free will, or you will be cut off from the source of what makes life life. And that's why we have this artificial intelligence anti-humanist movement where people want to upload their consciousness into a machine, because they want to take what they like about life and then get rid of having to follow these universal laws, so that they can use other people to who are maybe in touch with spirit, to take the things from life. You can see how complicated and how unsteady this model is, right? Where these people who want to exclude themselves from the collective and exploit the collective, right, are by cutting themselves off from source, they become vulnerable. And the only reason they seem powerful, right, is because that's the indoctrination that we're under. Like right now in my country, in my region, in my area of land, there are many people who are very unhappy with this information, and they were basically can't even look at it because it's so they feel so powerless, and they care so much about innocent people who are affected by this. And not only that, but the lies that we've swallowed about geopolitical reality, that that all has to be looked at, like through a different lens. Everything we've heard, we have to kind of recalibrate what that means with this blackmail, with this anti-humanist, with this distorted ego. So when you look at yourself as better than somebody else, and there may be things that you like, I might be a better swordsman, I might be a better writer, I might be a better speaker than another individual, but we're still inherently equal, right? Like the only thing that kind of separates people from their or I mean, we're all still equal no matter what, but what kind of the major disadvantage that someone can have is when they don't identify themselves as who they are. The ego means awareness of self. So when the ego is the false ego, it's not aware of itself. So you really want to have a really strong ego, but the word ego, just like so many things, has been turned around. So what it means to have a strong ego, or an effective ego, or a blessed ego, is that you see yourself clearly. You see yourself for what you are. You see your physical self, you see your spiritual self, you see your soul body. And when the ego is truly healed, when the self sees the self, when the higher self sees the whole self, right? When everything is in alignment, there is no power over paradigm, there is no Epstein files, there is no etc., right? And they say it all goes back to Atlantis. When the Atlanteans were founded, they were connected to Source. And like I kind of described, there were some individuals who were better at A, B, or C, but they were all inherently equal in the fact that they were a soul in a collective soul, and there was no one telling another one what to do. And then over time, there rose to be a king, and this king, though he might have been just and powerful, he she, if it was a hermaphroditic entity, he became like what we think of as the rebellious angel that took some of the angels with him to earth. Like this is kind of the story here that we're talking about, historic version of the story, where Emilius, I've known the king to be called, it was the greatest being in the world, maybe like the ultimate human as far as wisdom and power and so forth, but somehow that was corrupted, right? That's sort of the story, where he, maybe out of compassion, right, or maybe for the right reasons, he had this false ego come in, where he thought that he could direct everyone else and sort of supersede the free will of others to make one great society that was all on the same page and so forth. But that's the moment when the connection to Source was getting fuzzier and fuzzier, and eventually Atlantis fell and gave rise to a great cataclysm, dark age, etc. So I ask each one of you individually to look at your own life, right? And to think of any time that someone has exhibited power over you when it felt unjust, right? And you had to accept it. And just go back to that moment when someone was trying to control you and they were successful, right? And just rewrite the scene as a memory. Like, let's say someone told you to cut your hair and you didn't want to. So go back, remember that scene where you felt you had to obey, but it really wasn't appropriate. It wasn't your parent telling you to, stay out of the street. It was more like your, your military, your ROTC teacher telling you had to shave your head. There you go. So if you can think of something like that, just rewrite the scene as visually accurate, as visually real as you can. When you visualize things, the more you can see it, smell it, feel it, touch it, taste it. Like, really use your mind to visualize. It is not effortless to visualize. Typically it takes great effort and practice, and you can get really good at it. right? And you can be a really effective human being if you do this. This is one of our greatest, when I say like each person has their individual talents, well, each animal has their individual talents. And the human's individual talent is partially this manifestation, visualization, free will, and ultimately compassion. Because once you get a bit clearer view of what's going on, you take out the interference, you stop using the EMFs and the news cycles, and once you purge the GMOs and everything you want to get out of your life that isn't connected directly to source, it's just natural, right? Like it doesn't, the struggle falls away once you, because the struggle is only what the self is using to learn. So we kind of get to choose our struggles. There's always going to be a struggle, right? I mean, you don't have to call it struggle. You can say everything's easy and lovely, but I guess there's always a challenge, right? And challenges can be fun, and games can be challenging, right? So it doesn't have to be terrible, but I think trying to make things easy isn't really the answer per se, because doesn't lead to ease if it doesn't go with the universal law that free will is absolute. You cannot affect another's free will. If someone else is harming other people, right, generally speaking, they're harming them because they're taking away their ability to execute their free will, whether it's killing them, making them sick, making them stay or go or do something that they don't want to do. That's the disease. Once you try to get someone to do something they don't want to do, even if it's your girlfriend or your buddy, if you're trying to convince them that they should do what they don't want to do, right? I mean, is that bad to do that? I mean, that's what we all do, right? And I'm not going to go ahead and say it's bad, but what I'm going to say is, like, if you stole someone's free will, that's bad. And coercion, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. If you give them all the information, factual information, opinion information, and you kind of frame it in a way that's fair, let's say, then that I would say is morally okay. But if you're using deception, if you're hiding certain things and only giving certain information, generally speaking, right? I mean, there's nuance, but generally speaking, that is immoral, because you're trying to get someone else to execute your will rather than executing your will yourself, right? So once you're subsidizing your free will to other people through deception, well, that's the Epstein files, right? That's exactly what we're seeing that this world is running off of. And a lot of people think it's a new phenomenon, right? And I don't think it is. There's always, okay, so let's play the find the villain game. Epstein, villain, right? He wanted to do bad things, including replicate himself in unnatural ways that go against nature, and nature is the ultimate teacher. So, bad guy, right? But wait a minute, how did he get that way, right? Somebody probably coerced him, somebody probably blackmailed him, somebody probably did these things to make him so good at it, right? How did he get so good at it? So then we can trace it all the way back to Emilius, let's say. He's the ultimate villain, who might be the reincarnated Jesus. See, because Emilius was conquered and destroyed by nature, because he went against nature. And then he came back as the first man, Adam. And he, as the king of all men in Atlantis, he had a huge collective experience. All the wisdom of every being that was under his rule came with him. All the people who were exploited, so when I say Emilius was the reincarnation of Adam, it was actually every human being in Atlantis was Adam. So Adam committed the original sin, which was essentially defying God's will, let's say. And as the first human being of our race, he committed the sin that Jesus, when he was baptized, when he was sacrificed, is supposed to have freed us from, so that we're no longer bound to the path of leaving divinity, and we can stay on the straight and narrow because we have this original soul reincarnated and went through the steps, went through the ritual, went through the baptism, went through the fire, the spirit baptism, and all the things, right? And the pain that he caused others was inflicted on him. And he taught us compassion. He said what I'm saying, right? The great teacher, he said, don't harm other people. Everybody before him was saying, you should kill your enemies and save your friends. And that's very much human nature. And that's very much what we're still struggling with in this country. And I'll tell you right now, you should take care of yourself first, your family second, your friends third, and everybody else fourth. But that doesn't necessitate you taking another person's will unless that person is taking other people's will. And obviously there's a lot of arguments that could be made. Well, he did this and she did that, but it comes down to philosophy, because nobody's teaching us philosophy anymore. Philosophy is like a dead science to the average human being, as far as they know. I mean, of course they're being taught philosophy, but it's through social media or any other cultural indoctrinated school systems, or any other cultural way that is essentially one person trying to take another person's sovereignty. So just to talk specifically, so people have some grounding here, I know a lot of people who are compassionate in general, right? They might not have access to the universal consciousness in a way that's articulate, but generally I interact with them and they have some compassion for other people. They don't judge people by the color of their skin or the culture they came from. They want everybody to be safe and happy. That's generally how I meet people and they feel. And then there's another class of people that feel like, well, I have to protect my family against invaders, and we have to destroy them, we have to get them out, we have to, everybody kind of has to conform to my will and do my will's bidding, right? But trauma leads to that control, that false ego once your ego is no longer in line with the divine. What happens is it struggles to identify itself, so it clings to this mortality. And that's when people say they're egotistical, generally what they mean is they're mortal. They identify with their mortal self. So if you identify strongly with your mortal self, the belief in an afterlife is almost way too far-fetched, right? It's like, yeah, we go to heaven if we're good, we go to hell if we're bad. But it's like, I try to convince myself that, but my ego is like, well, this is it. Your physical body's dead. Your thoughts stop. It's over. This is what to cling on to, like those pleasures that you have in this body. That's all you got, man. But of course that's the false ego for a reason, because that's the path of destruction, and there is no sustained level of happiness in that mindset, because you're an immortal being. If you want to pretend like you're mortal for a while, that can be fun, but if you forget that you're immortal and you're convinced that you're mortal, then that is destructive. That is how you go down the dark path to losing your spiritual gifts, and etc. And that is where, when we look at these other people who are us in another life, I don't care who you are Epstein. I don't care who you are Donald Trump. Like, you are everybody in another life. Like, we're all the same life. at a different time, at a different place, right? But anybody is capable of anything we've seen on Earth. It's important to get that in. Like, you might have had a great upbringing, you couldn't imagine harding a fly, but change your upbringing, change your DNA, change your this, that, the other thing, and you're capable of whatever. You're all the same. We're all the same. It's one. We're all one, right? Now, does that mean we should feel guilt and associate ourselves, our true selves, with what? No, because our true self would never harm another. Anytime we veered off the path of true self, which is the potentiality of a human being, that's what you don't want to identify with. That's what you don't want to hate people for, because that actually reinforces your identity, because your true self is up here and it knows the truth. So as much as your mortal identifying body wants to hate others and love the self and hate the self and love others and all that bullshit, excuse me, it's not really PG, but I guess it's PG. It's only one swear. So the idea is you're starting to see clearly. You're backing up the camera, right? You still identify with your body. You're taking care of yourself. You're breathing. You're eating right. You're drinking the water. And that's only going to help you clear out this gunk that's associated with this false path. Because once you're off the false path, you stop eating the right stuff. Once you let someone control you, they think, well, if I give them red dye, then they'll be easier to control. Here you go. Here's some. So you got to learn to trust your own inner wisdom. It's like, listen to other people, but don't be offended if they disagree with you, because you can have a separate opinion without being the enemy of another, right? As long as you're not as long as you're not taking away each other's free will, you guys can coexist with different opinions, and you better, because if we all had the same opinion, then this place would just fucking... now I'm swearing. Okay, not PG. This place would really not be good if we had no second opinion or third opinion, or, let's face it, 9th billion opinion, because more people isn't bad. Less people, if it's against nature, if somebody goes against nature to make less people, I would say that's not good. But generally speaking, we just kind of, we accept the fact that this state of material is temporary, and that's how you get the most out of it. If you try to fool yourself into thinking that this body, this world, this physical space is never going to change, then you just set yourself up for heartbreak. But if you can accept the fact that you are an immortal being that's in this temporary place for a while to learn a lesson, and that when you learn the lesson, you're going to progress in the direction you want to go. So the material doomsday is that each individual does not have any agency over where they're going to go, and the only hope is to join the collective, whatever that is, and do as they do, and that way we'll have the highest probability of survival for the highest amount of time, and the soul is fake, and etc. But I'm here to tell you that that's fundamental indoctrination in order to have power over another being, to fool them into giving away their own sovereignty. And there is no other than the self. There is no enemy outside of self. There is no need for hatred, right? Because hatred is denying self, pushing you into the false ego, which is going to lead to vulnerable individuals being exploited. That is the path of false ego. And I think proof positive. And I know that there's an effort to divide the country and the world through authoritarian and intimidation and creating, secret police, and getting, like during the pandemic, when people were we're snitching on each other. Like, to create this divisive culture so that source doesn't come in, and then people don't connect with source and realize their own individual power, so that they stop giving it their sovereignty away to these individuals who have the unfortunate false ego state of mind. So how are we going to solve this problem? Let's get over ourselves for a minute and stop hating somebody. Obviously, nobody wants anybody else to get hurt. I don't want it, right? But I know for a fact that hatred is the goal of division. Like, for the populace to hate each other, or even to hate the governments and the elites, that is division. That is a divisive tactic. And we're deep in, we're mired in division. And the ones who are awakened souls are realizing the division is a distraction to keep us from our power, right? From our love, from our wisdom. So to step back into love, wisdom, power, if we go into the self, we see the whole self, we see ourselves as the entire universe. And then we tune into that vibration within ourselves, and we allow love, we allow compassion, right? And if we feel hatred, we forgive ourselves for hating, and then we analyze, what is it about ourselves that we're not seeing clearly right now? Why am I hating this particular thing, this particular person, this particular situation, right? Why is the universe showing me this now? There's 9 billion of us here. We were all, or whatever number, we were all meant to see everything that we see. There's nothing that's not meant to happen. Even if you perceived that you lost your sovereignty and you gave away your free will, that was meant to happen, because it teaches you, right? It teaches you. And one day you will reclaim your sovereignty as an infinite being. One day you will rejoin the source, and you will carry that wisdom with you that came from the fall. And that's the unique position we're in. That's the reason there is turmoil. That's the reason we're not just all sitting in a happy utopia. So on a practical level, how do we stop the power over paradigm? First thing, stop hating each other. Stop fighting each other. If you disagree with something, that's great. I'm so glad you disagree about something, okay? Because that's what free will is. It's everybody gets to have their own will. And if everybody had the same will, that wouldn't be free will. It would be free will for the one will. But this is, everybody gets an individual free will on this realm. And that's amazing. And just because someone believes in something that sounds ridiculous to you doesn't mean you're right and they're wrong. What it means is you two have differences. You might have even gotten here through different ways. How is that possible? Because this isn't a material realm. This is a projection of light. I could have got here through evolution. She could have got here through Elohim floating upon the earth, breathing life into clay. And she could have got here through like a person playing a drum, and the vibrations coalescing into will and matter. There's so many different legends, and they're all true, because you have, like, think about how complex you are. You have so many aspects of yourself, right? Like, people say, I have my feminine side, I have my masculine side, but really you have any number of sides, and your opinion could be completely different on something from 1 hour to the next, like what you want to eat. Like, moods change, and that is the soul's journey through physicality. It has to go from every different possible way of existing to decide or to gain the wisdom of what is divine, right? Because what isn't divine isn't well understood until you experience it. And therefore you can recognize it and avoid it, right? Like, to temper the will, the wisdom, is through experience. There is no other way to get wisdom. If you read a book, you can gain a lot of knowledge. And you can follow directions on a video and do really well and fix the door. But until you actually fix the door, you don't gain the wisdom, right? Because the physical world is different. It's different. Like, what works here doesn't work there. What works for one person doesn't work for another person, because belief plays into it. So it's almost like you can't retain information when you read unless it has some relevance to you, unless you've experienced it. And this is exactly what life is. And this is exactly our opportunity right now, is to realize that we're going to be compelled to hate other beings, whether they're foreigners or Trump supporters or anti-human AI creators or Israeli supervillains. Like, all these individuals are here to learn how not to hate, because you're actually not going to progress spiritually until you love every being. I mean, you're not going to ultimately progress beyond this form that we're familiar with. Once you're compassionate with all beings, including, starting with yourself, and then realizing all is self, and then learning to love every being and forgive every being, and then execute that forgiveness with your action. Because it's one thing to say, I forgive you, but it's another to feed a hungry person or house a homeless person. And our culture is taught that the individual is powerless, that the individual shouldn't bother trying to use their own individual power. They should only use others. They should only exploit the power of others, and that's the only way to rise to our true potential, is to exploit others. That is the culture. But that is obviously false, right? That is like a bad gut bacteria, right? But the true culture that we want to inoculate ourselves with is the culture of, I'm open to new ideas. I stand firmly with nature, and I see the light in all beings. Not seeing the light in someone is much different than allowing them to harm others, right? I'm not saying to pretend like there's only light in this physical realm in which we live. But, well, maybe it is only light, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't want to deny the atrocities and just ignore them. But I want to look at the root causes. Again, power over paradigm. That's the root cause of this global elite, everything that we accept as normal. Borders, kings, presidents, essentially laws that do no harm and connect with the divine. Those are the two laws, like, do the will of the divine, and that's the law, really. I mean, love thy God, love thy neighbor, love thyself. Like, this is the law. So anytime you see one human not obeying that law, right, you do what you can to change it. And what you can do is love them, support them, communicate with them, right? Those are your main tools. If you use the tool of hatred and destruction, that is your fate. Be well.